This is Lou Elizondo, and you are listening to That UFO Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. My name is Andy, and we're going to do a breakdown to kick off September. I get the feeling, before I introduce who's joining me, but you'll know that anyway, things haven't gone quiet necessarily, but we might be in the eye of some kind of storm. Things have gone eerily still. Something's on the horizon. Is it good? Is it bad? To discuss this with me and some more news points, I've got Dan joining me back in the UK still temporarily. Dan, how are we?
Hello. Yeah, we're a surprise for people.
Yeah, I'll just give the audience. I hate saying that word. The audience. I hate the people listening and watching. Both of them. A quick hello, and I don't know how long this will last. It's incredibly hot here today, and as people will well know by now, the shed, it's like 27, 28 degrees outside. The shed's about 35 or 40 probably in here. Ooh. I have an ice block up my back, and I'm not joking, Dan. You can attest to that.
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, air is of a premium, and the neighbours at the end of the street are very kindly having a barbecue in their front garden, and all I can smell is burning. So I'm literally running out of air, and it smells like the shed is burning down. It could be. I don't know. I'm just going to go with it. It's them still cooking food.
Yeah, so this might be the last episode.
Yeah, I should have done a live. It would have gone viral. Like, you know, Scottish podcast host, shed goes up in flames. He keeps talking, idiot. But anyway, yeah. Speaking of broken things going up in flames, let's talk about AARO first, Dan. Well, actually, let me ask you a question first, okay?
Sure.
Because it ties in. Taking stock of where we are, we've come out of August where the House and Senate, or the US government, as many folks would kind of say, that all the politicians have had a kind of break. They've not been, in there during August. That's where they take their break, isn't it? Yeah. Following on from the hearings, the David Grush testimony grabbed worldwide attention, headlines, imagination, exploded very quickly, burnt out very quickly. And I don't feel things have gone quiet. I don't think things are running at a rapid pace. And like I mentioned at the start, Dan, it feels like we're waiting a little bit. I was trying to work out how to word that. And it reminded me, like, do you remember watching like 24 back in the day and like binging the box sets on DVD? And you had to put on that next episode constantly. And it'd be like 5 o'clock in the morning. And you'd be like, oh, I need to put on disc 3. Well, imagine you put on the new disc and it's frozen. And you're just waiting on that next episode to play to find out what's happened with Jack and his daughter and everything. That's where I feel we're at. Like, everything's on pause and it's like it's ready to go again, but I don't know if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad or if we're going to still be in limbo. What are your kind of thoughts of where things are?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like, it feels a little limbo-ish, but there's stuff happening behind the scenes, you know? We're hearing that there might be some Senate hearings coming up. We're hearing that the House isn't going to have any more UAP hearings. Mike Turner said that they weren't allowed to because it might be embarrassing to the DoD, which I think is kind of telling, you know.
Well, let's talk about that then. So,
sure.
Is it embarrassing for them? Has this been framed in the right way? And this is me playing devil's advocate for that conversation to grow and carry on. And I'm not saying this was any fault of, a David Grush, a Fravor, a Ryan Graves, or a Burchett, or anyone who was involved in that. But is it just there's been so much pushback that it was too easy, given what was being discussed, to make it something of an embarrassment, not for those with an interest in the subject, but for anyone outside of it to go, look, are we really spending tax dollars and time on this?
Well, there's two ways it can go, right? Like, you're right. That's definitely one of them. Like, other politicians looking in and other people looking in and kind of going, really? This is where our money's going? My kid can't eat in school for free yet. We're doing UFO hearings. But then the other side of it is that potentially the DoD haven't been fully forthcoming about what they have. And that there are multiple groups, and what we're witnessing is essentially an arm wrestle to get information out. So there's two ways it can be embarrassing, potentially. So I kind of see why they don't want it in this forum. But at the same time, I think it speaks to the importance that we have it in this forum, because we need someone to be an adult over there and throw their hands up and say, we don't know if they don't know, and they need more help scientifically to solve these things,
Is there? I've got no notes on this, by the way. This is all pure raw discussion, folks. So it could be awful. is there another way it could have been done? Now we've had the hindsight, we've had some time after, we've seen the reaction and the pushback and the shitstorm that David Grush has had, because we're going to touch on the Corbell and Knapp appearance on Rogan, and that's something they mentioned, that the stuff behind the scenes that's gone on with David Grush has been horrendous. I hope we find out eventually down the line so he gets some kind of, compensation, not necessarily monetary wise for that, but just something to vindicate what he's done, because it sounds like he and his family are getting a horrendous time for all of this. And you can imagine that worldwide exposure, just for a start, wasn't easy to deal with, let alone what he was talking about and the people that were pushing back against him. But in hindsight, do you think there's anything that could have been done differently?
Yeah, I think so. We know that Grush has said that his investigation, speaking to 40 people over 4 years, has led him to the beliefs that he shared with us.
Yeah.
The the Department of Defense Inspector General is looking into those claims and has pushed it to Congress. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's an argument that could be made to say, we should have got the results of that report before we put these people in a hearing setting, so that we don't have to have you guys can go into a skiff next week or in 2 months, or, all that hoo-ha. It could have been bypassed if these reports were on the table before the hearings were had. And then a bunch of questions are removed that people had after the hearings, right? Like, no longer are people kind of going, we want these first-hand witnesses. We want to see what they've seen. We want to see the evidence that's been given to the IG. If that report is made by the IG and they've seen all the evidence, we kind of have to, I want to say defer to them, but I don't want to fully defer to a government agency because, we know that they can obfuscate and hide things. But it would be a lot more informed of a discussion and hearing if those reports were already handed in. We've seen the DoD IG has put up the results of the investigation on DoD's handling of the UAP issue over the years. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen that report, but it's available in a classified setting. So these politicians could read that and they could go in fully armed, kind of knowing how the DoD have handled it, what the outcomes are, instead of just juggling conspiracy theories, essentially, which is what people outside of this subject will see it as. We very recognize that, we recognize that we're playing with puzzle pieces, that we don't necessarily know the mm-hmm. final puzzle yet. That picture on the front of the box, as you like to say. But that might have been a bit more apparent had we had those documents before going in,
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that in modern society, everyone's guilty of reading a headline and not the body of the text, or you make snap judgments based on a one sentence Twitter picture, or X picture, whatever it might be. And it's not unfair on the general public who aren't involved in this subject to just look at headlines and go, this guy, came forward, he's a whistleblower, but he's talking about alien bodies and secret spacecraft, but he can't tell us where any of it is, so what a load of nonsense. They don't look at the setting that it happened in, they don't care to, and you wouldn't expect them to either. That's not what human nature's all about. So maybe in hindsight, as everything is 2020, isn't it, there were some ways it could have been done better, but what do you think at this point? We're kind of 4th of September as we record this now, Dan, 2023, year of our Lord, as some people like to say, or year of a Lord, who knows? Not just myself, the Time Lord, who knows, Doctor Who. As we sit here, what were some of the positives to come from it that you can see? For me, I'll kick off to give you time to think. I think the overwhelmingly positive reaction from especially the UFO community to the treatment David Grush got after the hearings, to kind of back him up and call out how bad it was, that Intercept hit piece, Ken Klippenstein, whatever the dude's name was.
Yeah, that's right.
To come out and support David Grush the way they did was fantastic. And I think that maybe gave some, thumbs up and beckoning forward of other first-hand witnesses first-hand witnesses in general, because David Grush isn't a first-hand witness to craft or bodies or material. Sure. But to say, there would be a support, but is that enough? That makes me think, it's still just that online community, which is still relatively small. The general public didn't go into a meltdown. It was a news cycle for a few days and it came and went. I don't think that's all bad necessarily. So yeah, what about you? What are some of the positives to come from the fact that we've had the hearing, it happened the way it happened, and we are where we are?
So for me, there would be three positives. One would be setting up for next witnesses at the next hearing. It showed there's a hunger for these kind of hearings, for this discussion to happen, for this subject to progress into kind of more of the light instead of the darkness and murky kind of waters that it lives in. Legislation has been added to and kind of bundled up. I think we're on seven pieces of legislation processing that will all be kind of brought together during a conference between now and when it gets presented to the president, which usually
we're not far off like a Christmas calendar for that, are we? Like a
Exactly.
12 days of legislation countdown.
Yeah, exactly. If you read that the NDAA has been passed, currently these things are in the NDAA. It's the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. That's the main one that they all seem to be folded into, and that's really far-reaching. Specifically as well, in that they talk about non-human intelligence a lot, and that phrase is kind of poured out now. Like people know that as a phrase, whereas before the hearings it was still a little bit kind of on the fringes. Most people would say ET, and we were searching for like a broader definition. Now we're talking about non-human intelligence. I did contact the spokesperson from the DoD to ask, when they make statements about things like we found no credible evidence of extraterrestrial technology or visitation, whether that includes non-human intelligence or whether it's different from it. Susan very kindly informed me that it does include it, even though I would say, in a conversation between us, I think we'd agree that extraterrestrials are non-human intelligence, but not all non-human intelligence is extraterrestrial. So it's the broader term, right?
And just to say, to be fair to them as well, who would probably want to stay away from having that conversation, they've got to say that it includes it, because they don't know, do they? Like,
exactly, they don't know.
Just to be on the fence, let's say for a minute, if the DoD and everything, was totally on point and actually telling the truth that they had no crashed craft, they had no recovered bodies, there was no such thing as alien abductions, but tomorrow something landed in San Francisco and went, we're here for the first time ever. No, we've never been here before. They could say, well, we did include it. But
that's really sus if they come out of the saucer and that's the first thing they say. We're going to be it sounds like you've been here before.
The zip on the back, yeah. We've never been to planet Earth before. Yeah, where's President Biden? Oh, I mean, yeah.
Your leader.
Yeah, so to be fair, that they've got... It's not... And I think sometimes online we can see that sensationalized by folks. Susan Goff confirms that they include alien language, and it's like, well, no, they can't dismiss it.
Exactly.
Because they don't know, or they're saying they don't know. Maybe she doesn't. Yeah.
In the same way as we say UFOs, and we don't really mean unidentified flying objects, we have a few ideas about what they could be, right? All those things are kind of, inherent and unmentioned. It's more of a, like, I guess, a colloquial use, like a broader kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing that, I was really pleased about from the hearings is I listened to a bunch of different podcasts, and two in particular, one about The Expanse, Ty and that guy. They go through The Expanse and talk about sci-fi and things like that. And also the Kingcast that talks about Stephen King stories. Both of them this week were talking about David Grush and UAP at the front of their shows. And I thought that was really interesting because they're just not really in the UFO community. Mm-hmm. So during this space before, Congress and the House comes back on September 5th and 12th, respectively, I think it is, the story's kind of trickling down. This is how trickle-down economics should work, right? Like it should go to all the places that it hasn't been before. So everyone is kind of aware of the claims. And I feel like I guess what would be the term, like the non-enthusiasts are starting to get involved a bit more than they have been previously, thanks to those hearings.
Where do you think we're going now? So like you say, we're starting to get politicians back in the United States into a kind of working format. And do you see us getting more before Christmas? Obviously, we've still got the Ukraine-Russia situation that seems to go up and down on a daily, weekly basis. You've still got all the Trump stuff going on in the US, which takes up a huge element of the news cycle worldwide, to be fair. We get a lot of that in the UK.
And that's only going to get worse as we start ramping up that election in the US, right?
Yeah, and you mean worse as in it'll take up even more of the headlines.
Yes. Yeah.
Dan is giving no political affiliation there whatsoever, folks.
Yeah.
And any number of other things that happen in the news as we head towards a winter, there's going to be no doubt the energy crisis is going to kick off again. People's bills are going to go up. All of that. Where do UFOs fit into that conversation? And I think, Dan, that goes back to my original question of, is it too easy to call this embarrassing in that sense to kick it down the line? And it's that power play is almost too easy for them, for they, as we like to say, they who like to control all this in the background and, the shadowy figures that control this situation. It's almost just a bit inevitable, but maybe one that we have to just take on the chin and two steps forward, one step back.
Yeah, like in previous years when the legislation has come, tracking through and gotten to the president's desk, I remember thinking, is it good that it's going through kind of under the radar and spoken about? It's bipartisan, but the more attention something has, the more potential there are for people to be like, oh no, we've got to shut this down. Like we can't be spending money on this. This year they're requesting $27 million. So this is, the more attention on this now, a politician could come along and say, hey, I want that 27 million for my school district, for healthcare, for stuff like that. And I can't really argue against that as much as I want this to be solved.
And also, and to be fair,
more visibility means more fire, basically.
Yeah, we know people who would have that conversation, and it's not a slight against them, who would be like, it's the biggest topic in conversation of all time. Everything we have should be focused on this. But people still have to go to work. People still have to feed their children. People still have to pay medical bills or try and fund medical bills, depending where you are in the world. And so you get why for a lot of folks, it's like UFOs are lovely, but all this stuff still happens as well. And I think that was a conversation, who did I have with it recently? And we've had it before about, the days after disclosure. Was it Avi Loeb had mentioned it, the day 2, he called it, or day -1.
It was Avi Loeb. That was a really good interview, by the way. And I said to you privately, but I'll say here as well, you totally got him off like post-it notes, because he puts post-it notes around his display, right? And I feel like we got to hear him talk a bit more freely.
I felt so for the first time in 3 interview attempts that he spoke a bit more. And I've had other guests that, between us, I feel that happens, not just with me, but in general. And it's hard. It really is to get them away from sound bites and saying the same things. But but no, Avi was good. And I feel I got more Avi in that one. So if you haven't listened to it, go back and check it out. He mentions that, the days preceding disclosure, the world doesn't stop. We don't all get flying cars, and the fossil fuel companies get, the CEOs get marched out with handcuffs behind their back, Scooby-Doo style, with, you finally got us, and everyone's got the free energy now. You're still going to be charging your phones with USB-C points. You're still going to be paying your energy companies. You still have a telephone bill. You'll still drive a fossil fuel car unless you've got an electric one, but you're still using fossil fuel to charge an electric car. It's all of that still happens. It's not going to be a quick process, and that's probably a discussion for another time. But
you make good points, though. Like, the day after disclosure is almost going to be quite boring, right? Compared to what we think of.
Maybe for you,
like unless unless aliens rock up over every city around the world. And I say aliens, I just mean the others. The visitors, whoever pilot these things. Unless they put ships all over the world, the day after is just going to look like the day before, except more academics will become engaged because, they know it's a real thing now. The government works real slow. Like in every country, it just works really slowly. So any official kind of announcement on that, if Biden came out tomorrow and said, we're not alone, we've been visited, unless the aliens show up, it's like you say, we're still going to be going to work the next day. We still got to carry on,
Can you imagine how frustrating it would be? And think of all those Hollywood scenarios that we're used to, even like Arrival, right, where they land in all these places, remote, but there's a lot of them. Independence Day, we track them coming in from space, and they split up and park all over the park. All over the park. They park their car all over the world. Imagine like we tracked a big craft coming in from somewhere. It gets here and it like went somewhere mega remote that no one expected, where there wasn't anyone, stayed for about an hour and then left before anyone could get there.
Yeah.
And it was like, they were here, but they're gone again.
A really good example of that is, look at the Tunguska explosion. There was supposedly a meteor that came in and blew up over the top of like this forest.
Yeah.
People kind of knew that something had happened, but it's such a remote location that it took people so long to get to that they were amazed that the trees were all flattened when they got there.
If it was like Antarctica or something, where
it's just
they announced
remote.
it and it came and it went and gone.
Like, what would you even say to that? If Biden came out tomorrow and said that literal scenario had happened, would you be like, prove it? Or would you be like, yeah, sure, aliens came and flew off?
I'd be asking the wife permission to go for a couple of days looking for flights to Antarctica. Like, mega expensive.
Imagine if the aliens landed, just the one location they went to was the mountain that Anjali told us about.
Imagine they came out and said, right, is Anjali here because she's been telling you about us? And we were like,
we kind of need her as the go-between, and we're just like, oh my God, just...
As I slowly pick up the phone and unmute, there we go. Start to DM, hi Anjali, can we get that interviewed? No harm in all that, but yeah. But it could be, but joking about it, it could be a totally wildly different scenario than we've ever thought. On that, let's talk about the Avi Loeb paper, because I feel we can circle back to what we were discussing. And something I was going to mention there was part of that. Avi Loeb had him on. He mentioned that obviously the book Interstellar is out. I recommend that for folks. It's not, and I didn't want to say this to Avi because I don't want this to sound the way it's going to sound. It's not a difficult read.
Okay.
It's like you get through it quite quick.
Damning review.
No, not at all. It's in a really good way. It's quite a fast read, and I remember reading wrestling autobiographies when I was younger that would look really thick and chunky, and within like a day you'd finished it, and it was like, okay, the words were very generously spaced out on that page. No, it's a really compelling, interesting read. A lot of, if you listen to this podcast, listen to others like it, listen to podcasts like me and Dan do that aren't UFO centric but discuss it now and again, you'll see different ideas being discussed like that. Obviously the paper was studying the interstellar meteorite, as it was dubbed, that Avi has gone out into the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Papua New Guinea to basically excavate a part of the ocean to try and get bits of this meteorite. Dan, is that correct? Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I mean, it should be by now. I've spoke to him, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's more detail to it, but people can find that out from Avi in that interview.
I'm not a detail guy.
700 spherules, I think they got from the ocean.
So a spherule, though, is a little bit, isn't it? Yeah. Like a tiny, how big are we talking here?
They could vary, but we're talking tiny. Some of them you might not even be able to photograph, There was one photograph that they did share where you could see like a bunch of mud from the ocean floor, and then there was one spheral stat on top. So it could be marble sized, it could be sand grain sized, it could be smaller, we're talking really small things. So,
do you know what? I should have asked Avi this, Dan, and I'm going to ask you as if you're Avi. Don't do the voice. Get into trouble for that. How does he know that the stuff he's pulling up is definitely from said meteorite impact and not potentially stuff that's just been there before?
Yeah, sure. So in the paper, they specify basically that they had control regions. So they kind of know the path of the meteor that came in because it was tracked by US satellites, not by radar, but multiple US satellites. Radar is said by skeptics to be unreliable for tracking meteors, but they didn't use it, so it's fine. So they kind of knew the path. So they dragged the ocean outside of that path to see what the kind of surrounding area would look like, and then dragged the ocean within that path. And they compared the two. And the differences seem to be these spherules were highly present in the trail of what they think is the interstellar meteor.
Cool. So basically, Avi, when I spoke to him, couldn't talk about the results. Those were due to come out in a paper. That is now out. And as suspected, Avi is basically saying that it is interstellar, so it's come from outside of our solar system, galaxy. It's travelled a distance. We don't know where it's came from. Avi still, though, is having the conversation or asking the question that this could potentially still be technological or organic in nature, that it could be some kind of interstellar probe sent from another civilization, but we don't know because obviously it's impact, it's blown up, it's gone, and that's what he wants, basically further funding with Galileo project and people to get on board so he can investigate this further. It seems, and I know especially in the UFO conversation, we talk about all kinds of incredible stuff, literal alien spacecraft coming here from other planets, dimensions, taking people on board, operating on them, talking to them, giving them all kinds of weird and wonderful experiences. And here we seem to be going way back to square -6, don't we? Where we have a scientist who is trying to do some science to find out if bits of a rock may or may not be something from somewhere far away, but we don't know. And it's the wild swings of the whole UFO conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the difference. Avi spoke about Neil deGrasse Tyson being someone who speaks about science rather than practicing science. It's very kind of bitty. It's not as glitzy
That's
as
me
Hollywood.
Clicking. That's my jazz fingers for Avi. Yeah, click, click, click.
Yeah, it's not as glitzy as Hollywood would have you believe. Like it's just hard work. You're looking at tiny amounts of material and you're just extrapolating knowledge from them as much as you can. In this case, like I said, they found like 700 of them. They analyzed the spherules. And if you're in the community, you'll know this, the UFO community, you'll know the term anyway, but the isotopic ratios of material, basically these are like fingerprints for materials. Everything in our solar system was kind of formed by the same material, so it has this same fingerprint. Stuff from outside the solar system will be made of different stuff in different kind of measures. So it has a different fingerprint. So what they found is that this isotopic ratio has a fingerprint that says it was made or created or comes from a different part of the universe. What I love about what Avi's doing is that he's kind of saying, okay, we've confirmed like 99.99% sure that this is an interstellar meteor and this is the first one that we've studied and it's going to tell us a lot about science. But he's also keeping an open mind to kind of say, well, this could be a probe from a distant civilization. We sent out the Voyager probes, with the golden record on it with the naked people of pictures and stuff. Really, the first unsolicited nudes that humanity is sending into the universe.
And it said on the bottom, DM me, hun.
Yeah, DM me. So that's
Are we literally
sliding
into another civilization's DMs?
We're trying through Spherules. It sounds so provocative.
Intergalactic Tinder. Yeah.
This as long as it's subscription, I think you'll be able to get your intergalactic monies.
Yeah.
But they found this material that was beryllium, lanthanum, and uranium, which they shortened to BLAU as a phrase. There's going to be more testing on them going forward. We're only looking at this. This is IM1. There's another candidate that is IM2, which very cutely sounds, IM1, IM2. It's like a little conversation. But yeah, Avi's really kind of taking this slowly and keeping an open mind that it could be materials from a probe. We really don't know until we know, so we have to just be honest. And there's been a lot of criticism of Avi. I saw him on Michael Shermer's podcast. Michael Shermer is involved with the Galileo project. He's also involved with SETI and has a Skeptic podcast. And he reached out for a few comments that were pretty damning, actually, about Avi's work. None of those people had read the paper. So all the pushback against Avi, these statements were read and Avi was like, cool, we addressed that in the paper. Cool, we addressed that in the paper. Yeah. So it seems that Avi's science is sound. And it's just a case of waiting for, the scientific community to respond to the paper so that we can get it peer reviewed, we can get some responses, we can kind of get the conversation going. And hopefully at some point in the future, we'll hear a unanimous, fine, this is an interstellar meteor that you found and we're studying. Let's see what it tells us about the universe.
Yeah, I feel a lot of the pushback on Avi Loeb's work is from people who don't like the science he's trying to do. And I don't like Lord of the Rings. I don't like the movies. I get a bit bored. It is what it is, okay? I'm just not a big fan of them.
People at home right now.
I went to see...
walked out the first one.
Listen, I went to see all three of those in the cinema, right? And so I gave... What's the dude? Peter Jackson. I gave him my money. But I'm not going to turn around and say, those are awful movies and should never have been made. That's terrible cinema, because there's an audience for it. People like them. And obviously, I'm not... I don't make movies. I love cinema. I love films, but I can see how well they are made, how well they're produced, and I can see the benefit of making those because they made a lot of money and made a lot of people very happy, and also spawned new franchises, new technologies, all that kind of stuff.
Something's not for you, right? Like Justin Bieber, he's so popular that I'm like, okay, he's clearly talented, but it's not for me,
Yeah. Sorry to get... No, we won't get into the Bieber conversation. So Yeah, but you're right. It's just not for you. But I get the feeling that a lot of scientists just don't like the UFO alien aspect of the conversation that naturally comes with what Avi's trying to do. And I think he plays that very well. Avi's not jumping into conversations about little green men and flying saucers left, right, and centre. He's doing it in a very tactful, careful way. What I want to get to, Dan, though, is a little bit of speculation on this, because I think for some folks, okay, it's a paper based on little bits of what are probably rock. Are you going with, Dan, it's probably just rock?
Well, it seems to be an alloy of some sort of a few various elements. It looks like rock, but what does an alien probe look like when we're down to a grain sand level?
Yeah, cool. But I wonder, does this get us the starting point of getting more funding for underwater exploration? And I mentioned to you, Dan, a few weeks ago, I went to see the Meg 2. Spoilers for anyone who's epic masterpiece of a film, right? It is what it is. They basically go under a trench. It's called Meg 2, the trench, right? So they go into a trench and they pass what is a layer of warm water or something that I don't know if that actually exists or not. And it stops the shark coming through to get them because they have to outrun the Meg. And there's a point to this, folks. There is a point to it. But they go through and they end up in basically another whole ecosystem. I don't think ecosystem's right, but what is underwater, something like that. Yeah,
and these things do exist as well. There are underwater oceans,
and that's my point. That's the idea. And we don't know they're there, but they find this whole other ecosystem. Loads of megalodons are there, and they find all these weird little creatures and things, and it's just like, wow, all that stuff could be there. You look at movies like The Abyss, which discusses the idea, and I thoroughly recommend The Abyss to anyone watching. I think it's a movie almost ahead of its time. And I would love to. That's one I'd love to see remade with the tech now, even, because that you could do a lot with that. Pretty cool movie, and yeah, definitely well ahead of its time. I'd love to see people like Elon Musk or some other rich billionaire types who just want to throw some money away. Put some money into underwater exploration. Let's get some cameras reel down very, very deep. Let's get some real good technology down there. And is there something worth exploring under our own water that's going to help us find another civilization, potentially, either long gone or one that's left and came back, or maybe never left at all? Because that's a conversation we see kicking about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It blew my mind that, I've read Secret Machines before, but that the first book ends with, that, or maybe they never left. That's the line, the last line in it. And
spoilers.
It's been a while now.
Someone's like 3/4 of the way through the book right now and just absolutely cursing your name up and down.
It's fine. It's fine. I don't think that counts. Maybe, I don't know. Let me know if that counts as a spoiler. I guess
that's been a while, hasn't it? It's been a while.
It has been a while, and the second book's out as well. Like I won't spoil the ending for that one because
I've started. Yeah, it won't
to be continued.
Because I've started the second book. Audiobook on the way back from football at the weekend from Glasgow, so I'm like 14 chapters into the audiobook, 15 chapters.
Cool. So you haven't got to chapter 17 when Mick West is dressed up as a seagull trying to go?
No, definitely not yet, no. But I'm enjoying it, and we're going to be discussing the Secret Machines book in the next couple of days, next week or so, so look out for that one. If anyone does have any thoughts on that or any questions or opinion, send them over. That'd be good. But yeah, back to this, Dan. So underwater...
Underwater explanation would be awesome. There is a company, I can't remember off the top of my head what they're called, but they're building or have built. They're kind of submarines, but they don't look like submarines in the sense.
Not the one that was doing Titanic trips.
Not that one. No, this one is. It's taken more people to the bottom of the ocean in the past 2 years than have been on the moon. So we're kind of finally getting to the point where we're going to be able to start exploring the ocean because they've been down to the deepest depths, the Mariana Trench.
Yeah.
The actual device itself looks more like a wall that you stand up in, and it has a little viewing window.
All right.
They've been down so many times, and it seems like really robust and well funded. And the more this technology should enable people to go exploring these things, but we have to remember, they're still looking through a little slit in the edge of a wall, and what can you really see with that?
And that's mad that it seems easier to get into space though now with what Musk is doing with the SpaceX, and to get down into the water is so difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of speaks to the idea that we are pushing ourselves to kind of become a transmedium species, right? Like we lived in the water, we climbed out, we kind of developed on land, and very much the modern day, we exist in this small sliver of the Earth, and anywhere too high or too low, we die without building these sensor suits around us. So it's interesting that that's kind of overlapping as we're kind of starting to find these transmedium objects and realizing that, that's something we can do. I really enjoyed what Avi said about, when you find the first ant in the kitchen and then you find your second ant in the kitchen, it suggests there's a lot more ants and you need to go looking for these ants. So go look for them. Like, it's not that crazy an idea. We keep looking for life, in the Earth's mantle, under the ice, all these places that we thought the life wouldn't be, and we keep finding extremophiles. So for me, it would be really silly to ignore the possibility and to just, keep exploring with an open mind. You can go on your phone right now and you can look at a picture of the globe, and it'll give you essentially what it thinks the bottom of the ocean looks like. But the truth is, we haven't mapped a lot of it because we extrapolate it from.
Sorry,
imagine that was my point. I just took a left in there.
Can you imagine 3.5 years in, people like Andy's into flat Earth. I'm not. The documentary's funny, but yeah, we've all seen how it ends.
It'd be amazing. But it's extrapolated from the shape of the waves and how the waves change and things like that. So we really don't have a map of the oceans or the ocean floor. And we don't know if, areas like you're suggesting could exist in certain places. We'll build these sensors, we'll build we'll build what we need to build to kind of go explore these places, and we will explore them. But how long that's gonna take us, I don't know. But we can sure as hell say that the US government have a lot more knowledge about the ocean that they're willing to let on. They have that network of hydrophonic microphones under the ocean, where they're able to, like that sub that imploded a little while back. God bless those people. They heard that implosion on one of those microphones. So they could assist with a lot of the work that needs to be done here. So yeah, I hope that ocean exploration gets a bit of a kick up the butt, and especially if there are treasures down there like this should light a fire under everyone's butt to go do what Avi's doing. When NASA said they were doing their panel, Avi's response was, "Oh, welcome to the party. We've been doing this according to your standards for a little while now." And we just need more efforts like that, more study, more data, and then we can finally kind of start extrapolating and getting some ideas instead of just saying, "I don't know." Yeah.
I suppose moving on to one of the final points, just to talk about a couple of things from Joe Rogan dropped a podcast with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, Dan. Good to see Joe Rogan entertaining the UFO conversation again. Good timing as well. A few standouts for me. There was a big focus on the David Grush event, obviously, and I think it hammered home for me rewatching back a lot of those clips. We need that to not go away. I suppose full circle to what we talked about at the start of the podcast. The Grush testimony, and like I said, just my opinion from the beginning, is the follow-up is what's going to be huge for the progress potentially in this topic. And that's if we get progress in the right way. It's going to progress, but that it could also regress, or could be bad progress. We don't know. If the Grush story goes away, say we do get a few months down the line, Dan, and he's not coming forward again, or no one else comes forward, we don't get follow-up hearings, and the story does go cold, it could set the topic back years or decades. And is there a chance, and I just thought about this earlier, say that does happen, or somehow David Grush got totally discredited, right? Is there a chance that all the work done by To the Stars, Tom DeLonge, what he set up, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, it's almost like it didn't happen, or it goes back to square one? And a lot of people say, oh, the toothpaste's out the tube now, the cat can't go back in the bag, the genie can't go back in the bottle, blah, blah, blah. But it could.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had to think about that one there, yeah, just with a long pause.
Yeah, well, it kind of pulls a thread that I've been wondering. People say if this stuff wasn't real, the DoD should be able to just trot out a picture of the Tic Tac and it all goes away. Of course, that makes me worry that it will all go away. I feel like we're on the precipice of the general public kind of engaging with this in a full way. But right now, it's still enthusiasts driving the conversation, people who get really inspired to talk about this stuff. This past week, we've all been blown away by UAP being brought up in the election debates, which was amazing. I said to Elena not too long ago that I just hope that there's one question asked during the whole debates about UAP, and there it was, the first debate.
Are
the
you
reaction
happy it was
telling,
asked?
Right? I'm happy it was asked, but everybody laughed.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, wow, there's still so much work to do on this. And I feel like, even a 5-year timeline at this point, it's going to take a while for people to kind of, morph their ideas from laughing to taking this seriously.
Yeah.
And while that transition is taking place, anything can make it go away. Like people essentially, they are grasping for an easy answer. And if there's some easy answer that makes them not have to completely redefine their worldview and worry about, what the world's going to look like in a year or whether their job's going to still exist, then they'll take it. So if the DoD came out and they had a video of a Tic Tac and they could show beyond a reasonable doubt that it was that, and it was prosaic, then stuff might start, like, I guess maybe not going completely away, but regressing. Like, when you put shrink wrap on a fire and it kind of gets smaller, kind of like that.
I don't do that for fun. No, I know what you mean.
I know you know what I mean.
Asda pizzas in the UK. There's a niche reference for the UK audience. Anyone who gets an Asda pizza will know that analogy about the shrink wrap and the shrinking away. Mesmerizing piece of art that happens in an Asda. So
it'll shrink, but I think that the people that remain will be just as passionate and ferocious as the community is now. But again, like we always say, another point to remember is that the community isn't of one belief. We all have so many different opinions, and it's community in name only, really. So what are we left with if this current, if the legislation goes kaput and things like that? For what it's worth, I don't think it is going to disappear, but it could certainly go back to a place where only the passionate and obsessed need apply.
Because even in the same breath that, say, tomorrow we had a species proven to be genuine, we found that there were greys, and one of them came out and it was like, yeah, they're an advanced AI sent here from another civilization to study us, etc. So yeah, we've got proof we're not alone, and we're going to do some kind of focus groups with them. I don't know. I took that. It's getting very hot, right? But we're going to do a focus group with these beings, etc. You would still have, for example, a contingent of the UFO community, in brackets, who are all about loving light beings and the Palladians coming to save us all from ourselves and ascension of the soul, who would be like, yeah, that's all well and good, but yeah, the Palladians are still to come, and that would all still happen. That wouldn't go away.
I absolutely agree. I think we've spoken about it before, privately, maybe, I can't remember, but we were saying a very pertinent point that once it comes out, what the Tic Tac was, or, one specific group of others, what they are, you can kind of get a read on people in the community as to whether they accept that truth or whether they want to live with that God in the gaps and just, juggle that. Oh, well, that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about, the extraterrestrials, not the underwater beings.
But the gimbal didn't rotate. Well, it doesn't matter now, does it?
Exactly. Yeah. So, this is... it's primed for a psychological study as it rolls out or something like that. It's going to be really curious to see what people do. But the one thing that people can do is the website is declassifyuap.org. It's set up so that all the form letters are there. You can contact your senators, your representatives, and just let them know that you support the Schumer Amendment, the UAP Disclosure Act 2023. You don't need to say any more than that. Keep it short and sweet, the busy people, and just get them to note it so that when it comes up, they know people want to see this to go forward. We're not going to vote against it.
Is the Schumer Amendment not the one, and someone commented a few weeks ago, so apologies, folks, it's been a busy couple of weeks, but school holidays are over, so I'm back to normal now. I saw people commenting that the Schumer Amendment also allows for a lot more classification or covering up of information.
It does give a few outs, but there are very specific people who have to approve those outs.
Sure.
And one of those people would be a private citizen who was put in charge of the UAP review board. So essentially, we have to give over a certain amount of trust to this review board. We don't know who will be on it yet. There are processes mentioned in the legislation itself to say, oh yeah, if this is a bit sensitive, we can keep this back. Remember as well that it was based on the JFK kind of declassification of files. So that kind of
went
had
well.
the same provisions, you know, like there were certain things that just couldn't be mentioned. And
like who killed him?
Even Trump, for example, like he said he was going to declassify everything. He didn't. There were things that Trump was like, yep, fair enough, we can't release that. Whether it was a picture of him or in his dad on the grassy knoll, I don't know. But well, you know, this stuff has precedent, so they're trying to follow precedent. So it's a bit more kind of on the up and up, which I get. But it remains to be seen what would stay classified, what would be unclassified, the kinds of things that would be revealed. AARO put their website up this week, aaro.mil, if people want to go have a look at it. And on there, they said that they're going to share unclassified imagery of cases that they've solved. Amongst them is the Tic Tac, the Go Fast, the Gimbal, and they're all labeled as unsolved. So even though the classified info with those cases is being kept from us, there's still being very transparent about the fact that they don't have solutions for those things. So it isn't an all or nothing game. There are middle grounds that we can find here for that transparency and conversation to take place.
It's the closest thing we've got to OnlyFans for UFOs at the minute is that AARO website. So, but also within AARO, I suppose we should touch on this as well, Dan, that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is still in his role, but it does seem that things are in place for him to be removed at some point or replaced. Is it Catherine Hicks?
Kathleen Hicks.
Kathleen Hicks has been placed in a kind of an oversight position for that role.
So before it was Moultrie and Bray. They were the guys at the first hearing, the ones that were being really evasive and people just didn't like. Then in legislation last year, it said that the AARO had to report directly to the Defence Secretary. Kathleen, off the top of my head, is the Deputy Defence Secretary. So she stepped in and said, I'm taking this over. Great that she's done it. She's about, 9 months too late. But yeah, I'm glad, better late than never. So it remains to be seen, because she's seen, again, as someone that, will kind of use squirmy words to get around classification and corruption in government that is very obvious. There's a great clip with Jon Stewart.
I knew you were going to point that one out.
Kathleen Hicks, and waste in budgets in the Pentagon. And she essentially makes the argument that it's not waste, there's just not a process to track those things. And John very, astutely points out, well, that's waste then, isn't it? So there's still going to be some politicizing and things like that there, but we'll see. Benefit of the doubt. Let's give them a good run at this and see what they come up with. But I agree as well. I think Sean Kirkpatrick himself is not long for this organization.
I thought you were going to say this world, and that was a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that was heavy. I was
going to say that would have been a threat, Dan. That would have got you in serious trouble. On that, for anyone wanting to find out the legislation stuff, we don't need to talk about it, Dan. There's not a lot to talk about, as we mentioned, but D. Dean Johnson does have a post up on his blog, and it has all the UAP legislation in one place. I'll stick the link in the descriptions and stuff as well for folks if they want to go in and have a look at a lot of the stuff Dan talks about are quotes over the months and the various breakdowns and bits of legislation that are relevant. Yeah.
People that listen to this would have heard it. Like on the website there was some presentations that talked about AARO having to do like crash retrieval and analysis and exploiting the technology. That stuff was in last year's legislation. So, if you go back on the breakdown, you can hear us talk about it there. But it's great that, it just goes to show that when they're a bit more upfront with the information, it kind of catches people's curiosity a bit more. So I just hope that continues going forward.
That's Dan's dig it that it's not breaking news, and that stuff
it's not breaking news.
That was being reported as new, wasn't you?
The breaking news was that Liberation Times, Chris Sharp, found that exploitation kind of angle had been engaged to get some material and study it. That's all we know. We don't really know how in depth or the results of that, but that's it's attached to the news there. So it's really important that we kind of chase down the Pentagon and those kind of things.
Yeah, go back and listen to all the breakdowns. You'll get all that information.
All of them.
Yeah,
just for the AI jokes.
Yeah. Aye. And one last comment, Dan, from the Corbell Knapp stuff, and this is definitely one for you. At one point, Joe Rogan's talking about potentially the human being or the whole human experience as a farm for souls, basically, or souls. souls, depending how that goes with the accent. And the quote is that Joke says, maybe the soul is a thing, and Knapp and Corbell both say the same thing at the same time, that it's a commodity. We've heard this before, haven't we? When Tom DeLonge and others, Tom DeLonge didn't create the UFO topic, but he certainly popularised a lot of the modern take on it with some of the things he came forward with. And that's something he mentioned, remember, and I'll wildly paraphrase, and you'll know better than me, Dan, but Tom talked in the past about other beings being jealous of us having a soul. And perhaps, that's something they don't have, and free will is something we have that they don't like, and that there's an energy to a soul, and good and evil are a thing, karma is a thing. And that was just intriguing to hear that brought up on that platform with millions of eyes and ears on it. It was pretty cool to hear that conversation, not being played out, but it's mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't need to get too crazy with it. We can just kind of subtly kind of think, okay, well, if evolution is the same on every planet, Casper is real, and there are humans that look like us on multiple planets around the solar systems. Depending on how one of the planets look, life would be very different for them. So they, for example, they might not have a society where enjoying movies is a thing, where falling in love is a thing. They could all be geared towards just surviving every day. And they would look at us with a lot of curiosity.
Dan, just on that, very romantic of you, but we've got countries on this planet that people literally just survive every day still. Yeah. And that's where people, when they go on about,
such a good point,
our civilization would change overnight when UFOs land, children in Africa would still be dying the day after. And sorry to bring it down a tone, but that's a fact, isn't it? That yeah. And when people look at us and think, oh, we are so incredibly civilized, well, we're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, really good example. So if you take that country and you make it another planet, would those people look at us? Would there be envy? Would there be, the way of life that they have is great. Well, what is it that makes them different? And eventually they would be looking at genetics. They would be looking at, how we evolved. They would be looking to influence themselves in the same way so that they could maybe get the same enjoyment out of life. I've not said anything crazy there, but essentially, that's a really kind of like subtle way that you could look at another species being envious of us and visiting us and being curious about this, like a zoo. The more extreme side of the soul prison thing is that it plugs into the idea of reincarnation, which I know that's a touchy subject in the West, but in other places, you go to India and it's all built into the religion. It's not a crazy notion. And if anyone out there recognizes the name the Dalai Lama, that's a reincarnation story, and we all buy into that one. So it's really funny how casual that one is, yet how lofty. But the idea is that when we die, our souls are set to go towards a light, and if we go towards the light, we reincarnate back onto this planet. And some people see that as a prison. And in certain books, they say that when you see that light, you shouldn't go towards it, and that you kind of, like a butterfly going from a caterpillar to a butterfly, you will change form into something else. Essentially a bodiless human. So your soul is what remains, which I guess in that example would just be energy, right? Like the energy carries on. It doesn't get destroyed. It just changes form.
I think at this point, Dan, my soul is ready to leave my body and move on to another plane, given the temperatures. And if you're watching this on YouTube, my hair isn't slicked. That is sweat. So apologies, folks. Well. Yeah, thanks. Any dripping on the microphone during the audio version of this will not be removed. But Dan, thank you very much for joining me. Always a pleasure, never a chore. Secret Machines Book 1, we'll be chatting about some of the themes on that coming up, because I've finished it obviously finally. Michael Masters' interview will be happening very soon, and a couple of others. I'm just waiting on getting back to me with dates. And yeah, I'll get things a lot sharper over the next few weeks, as they haven't been the last 6 weeks, as his kids have been off school, and that has been absolutely mental in my household. So yeah, Dan, thanks all.
Thank you. And just one quick thing to mention before we close out. Hope everything's okay with the Blink guys and Travis Barker. We were due to go see them, and unfortunately they had to cancel one of the shows. But there is new music coming, and Tom's written some provocative terms on his guitar, Interloper and Haystack. If anyone out there recognizes those names as projects or anything else, get in touch. I want to know what you think of those terms.
Awesome. Yes, feel free. Definitely get in touch. And to the listener who emailed me yesterday asking for Tom DeLonge's contact details, I did email you back just to say I genuinely don't have Tom DeLonge's contact details.
Blink182.com.
Yeah, probably his website or his Twitter. Yeah, but there you go. If anyone wants to reach out with those, that'd be much appreciated as well. Thank you for listening, folks. That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a Tic Tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little Baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative game of state full on meta. I can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys, they thought this was noise, they thought it was a dream, they thought it was my toys, they thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what to do because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think I be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jake? But for being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life, consider your eyes. It wasn't a Tic Tac and not quite a saucer. It wasn't a Tic Tac and not quite a saucer.